Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lucia Gomez. I am your host today at Critica, NYC. As we enter National Hispanic Heritage Month on September 15th through October 15th, it is a great opportunity to speak to some of our local New York Latino leadership, working directly with our diverse communities and empowering them to take action. This will be the first of 3 interviews in the upcoming shows, and I really do hope that you enjoy it and you have an opportunity to learn a little bit more of those amazing leaders that are really taking it up a notch in our communities throughout the city. While there are definitely hundreds of public servants, both working in government as either directly elected by the people or working within our community-based organizations and nonprofit institutions providing direct services to our communities in need, there are not many doing the work of empowering communities to take civic action through citizenship, civic engagement, and electoral participation. My guest today is Eddie Cuesta. Eddie is the Executive Director of Dominicanos USA. DUSA, as it's known in short, is a nonprofit organization established in 2014 to empower Dominican Americans and other Latino communities through civic, social, and economic integration. Welcome, Eddie.
Well, Lucia, first and foremost, thank you so much, for inviting me to your such a popular program, Critica New York NYC. I think this is an opportunity really to really project some of the issues that affect the Dominican community. It's a real honor to be here. We come back a long way. I appreciate the opportunity that you are giving me to really express what DUSA does. As I remember when we first got started, you said 2014, but in preparation towards the latter part in the fall of 2013, you were very helpful in terms of, helping us to really put this project together with staff. So basically, the DUSA, Dominicanos USA, started out at Hostos Community College in the South Bronx. Our mission is to really to empower the Dominican American community through civic, social, and economic integration. We develop a state-of-the-art voter registration program, which started, at the end, as I mentioned, of 2013, making sure that we could go out into the different communities, in the Bronx, in other areas, with large population of Dominicans and other Latinos. Our project has yielded more than 175,000 voter registration up to date, basically in the Northeast, but New York being, the city that, have the largest Dominican population. We have been able to register more than 150,000. And, this has been a great success in terms of trust in the community, as well as, really projecting to our community importance of becoming U.S. citizens, as we were in many of the different communities. When we encounter a person, we try to figure out if they were registered to vote. Many of them that said no, we went ahead and tried to support them in helping them to become U.S. citizens. So, we have done a tremendous job in helping legal permanent residents to become U.S. citizens and really, participate in the electoral process by registering them to vote and mobilizing them.
Eddie, I don't know if you realize how unique, DUSA really is, right? I mean, Dominicanos USA is one out of not that many organizations throughout the country. I mean, I know a handful. I've worked with them throughout the last couple of years. Aside from NALEO, which I would say right now happens to be one of the largest when it comes to citizenship, census, right? Their educational funds. But you also have like Southwest Voter Registration and Education Project, which is really geared towards registering people to vote, similar to how DUSA was started, right? Obviously, in communities that require a different approach, right? Not just register to vote, register to vote. We already know registering to vote. Well, for those who don't know, vamos a decir, how hard is it, right? Because I just want to make sure that folks understand this is not just a not-for-profit organization that is servicing clientes, right? That come in, necesitan ayuda, un servicio. This is a different type of organization trying to get at similar communities that go for services, but approaching it from a different angle, not providing a direct service, doing something muy diferente.
Well, I think that's very important what you just stated, because DUSA, has been doing voter registration, throughout the years. We did not only participate in voter registration when it comes to election time. And I think many of the people that are in this field, that's when they do. So when we started this program, first of all, we have used a lot of technology. We're technology driven. We hire one of the premier data company out of Washington, D.C., Catalyst. And Catalyst helped us to develop a statistical model, Dominican model, that helped us identify those neighborhoods. I would say using census data, from 2012, 2013 in terms of national origins, and that was really very helpful. So we went out in the community. We go to barbershop with our canvassers. We train our canvassers. They were out doing door knocks, talking to the community. And you find in many instances that people say, oh, I don't want to vote because, nobody represent us. They would say, like in Spanish, yo boto la basura, throw out the garbage and things like that. So it was hard. It was not easy. Okay. And then we encounter all the difficulties, not with, registering someone, but, during the election time, a lot of people didn't understand, in terms of the education, that in New York specifically, you have to be registered for a political party in order to vote in the primaries. Okay. So we encounter a lot of those problems. People had registered to vote. Others didn't understand exactly what political party to register. As a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization, we couldn't tell them what party to register. So it was very difficult, when we encounter our first election and people will come in and say, well, I want to go in to vote, and they would not find their name because they didn't register for a political party. So it was an educational component, really being out there, talking to the community and making sure, that they understood exactly what was the poll site, the location. So this was an educational component. And since then, I think we have worked in every election in the city of New York, mobilizing our community, making sure they could, tap the voter lookup. We partner with other organizations like NYC Votes from the beginning, and others, that really, have done an extraordinary job, but they didn't have the know-how in terms of, of the sensitivity of our community. And I think that always made us very successful, the trust that we encounter from the community, really following up. I remember the first time that we did our Get Out the Vote, GOTV. At first you say Get Out the Vote, GOTV. What is GOTV? That's mobilizing the community. I remember we had registered, about maybe 25,000 people. And, we sent out mailers. Our mailers were very different because they were like, when you receive a check, and we made sure that, it had the poll site location. We had canvassers in many of the poll sites. And, we make sure, visiting most of the poll sites in the areas that we registered so many, people, to make sure that poll watchers, were there, and make sure, we got up at 6 o'clock in the morning, making sure that there was translators. So it's part of the process, in education. And now today, it seems, we feel that, I would say easy because it's very expensive, to doing, the GOTV, making phone calls, texting, doing door knocks. And I think that's a success of really, making sure that people realize that it's important, that they have to participate and be part of this mosaic, this country that has given us so much opportunity, and, the right to vote is so important. And we see what's happening today, when we look at so many states, that are changing the voting laws, I just could tell you, we started, due to the pandemic, an online voter registration. I think it behooves us to say that, New York is still very antiquated in terms, we were advocating for, same-day voter registration, early voting, and we've seen the changes, but it's still, the educational component is so important because a lot of people, they don't understand, we look at when we were able to have early voting, some of the issues that we encountered, that many of the poll sites for early voting were very far. If you look at Washington Heights, there were areas where, a senior citizen will make it very difficult, for them to go to one of the locations. So there are, new programs that, I should say, the new ideas that have been implemented, but we have to work around that, And now, I could tell you a little bit, with ranked choice voting, we took a very important position, not saying if it was good or was bad, but educating the community. Ranked choice voting was the educational component that we started from the beginning, and our results in terms of mobilizing, it shows, that we have pushed the needle, in terms of people, making sure they could go out and vote. So, voting is so powerful. Voting is so important.
So let's paint a picture here, Eddie, a little bit, right? In the country, the Dominican community is the fifth largest community, ethnic Latino origin community, right? Largest being the Mexican population, and it goes down that way. The Dominican community, Puerto Rican, Cuban, Salvadorian, Dominican. In terms of New York City and in terms of New York State, the Dominican community on the electoral side is almost the largest, but still the largest is the Puerto Rican community in the electoral angle. But definitely the Dominican community on a societal, right, just the largest Latino ethnic population in the city of New York. Some things that I think, because we can get into the weeds of the organization and what it does. One of the things that I find fascinating is that it's not just a linguistic barrier that we're overcoming, right? When organization like Southwest Voter does their work, they do it bilingual, right? When Aleo does it, Mi Familia Vota, there's a couple of Poder Latino, there's a couple of organizations across the country that are doing this in enclaves in certain states. But Dominicanos USA is not just trying to get to Dominicans and Dominican English speaking or Dominican Spanish speaking. Like, the ethnic component is key. You're trying to cross a challenge of getting people to vote, which is already a challenge for everyone. League of Women Voters, right? All the campaigns that try to reach communities day in and day out during an election time, right? Un tiempo definido, during election time. Dominicanos USA is doing this 365 days a year. You're running an operation that is trying to be ethnic centric for a purpose and a reason. And it's not just because, you only want to target Dominicans, because you target other communities as well, or more like anyone that lives in the same neighborhoods as Dominican. But you play a very unique role in being able to not just speak the language of Spanish, right, to voters that are new perhaps in the process, but you're also trying to tug at their heartstrings, right? Like, you're really trying to engage these voters all the time, speaking to them, sending them mail. How is that, and why is that the strategy, and how has it worked for you?
Well, I could start by saying, one of the, we partner, for instance, with a group of independent TV producers that are in cable TV. Okay, we go in and touch the ethnic media, Dominicans and other media, and we provide information. We have a lot of young people that work in our staff, that really are dedicated, and what I'm saying, we're creating leaders. Okay, and when you talk about the Dominican population in terms of the census data, I think that now when we get the national origin, it's going to show a huge increase, as we have from the 2017-2019 community survey, over 872,000, mal contado, in New York State, and over 720,000 in the city. Okay, so we have first generation, second generations, a lot of young people that are starting to realize, wow, we have an opportunity, and we're seeing a lot of young people that are running for office, Dominicans and others, women, which I think is so important. So there's an interest, and in previous years, many years ago, people would come and migrate and say, oh, we're going to go back home. We're going to return to the DR. We're going to be with our family. So they were more concentrated in the politics of the Dominican Republic, which, it hasn't changed that much still, but we see now they are rooted here. Okay. Studies is indicating, they go for vacation, they remain here, they're participating, they are being, part of the community board, they are being part of the educational system. And apart from that, we got to say that, we have a very high percentage of college graduates, especially amongst women. It was very interesting, in terms of our data, that we have about 54% of the people that we have registered are women. and 43% are millennials 18 to 29. And something more interesting, I think the idea of the legislation that was approved by the state to allow preteens to register, I think that's very good. And we have been working with that. We work with some of the schools. We make sure we have a curriculum on the Student Voter Registration Day. We partner with some of the principals in some of the schools, and we bring the curriculum, explaining why is it important to register to vote. And apart from that, just working with some of the summer youth students, just pre-pandemic, before the pandemic, we had during the summer, close to 60,000 summer youth, that we train them, they were out in the field as canvassers. This was the program in a partnership with Alianza Dominicana and Catholic Charities. And some of them today, they're 18, 19, 20 years old, and they vote, and they are grateful. So that leadership, I think, is what helps, and then you have others that have been here probably for so many years. And I think this is also very important for me to point out that New York has over 600,000 legal permanent residents that could become eligible to become U.S. citizens, So we have been, since 2015, 2016, we have been doing citizenship, free application, fee waivers, and have helped thousands of people to, path to citizenship. And I think that's so important because it's connected. You have the son that is telling the mother who's born here, hey, mom, you got to become U.S. citizens. You got to register to vote. And we've seen people that, we help people that have been in this country for 20, 30 years, that years ago they wouldn't have an interest, that are applying to become U.S. citizens. And I think that's one of the, I would say, milestone that we could discuss, in terms of success. Because, the becoming a U.S. citizen, it's so important. They have a U.S. passport, they could apply for federal jobs, and they could vote. I mean, I remember just in the presidential election that people were anxious to become U.S. citizens. And, the previous administration, nonpartisan here, just saying, the immigrants got hit hard. There was a proposal to increase the citizenship fees. The questions, for the civic exam was increased from 100 questions to 120. The waiting time. So that's what makes this city, this state, this country so important. That right to vote, because it's so meaningful. But you're right. The only way you could get the people involved is by educating them, informing them, telling them all the time, hey, we already, working, we already promoting that you could register to vote. The last day to register to vote is October 8th in New York, Yeah. And, we already started to put through our social media and informing that, to prepare the community, that they could register, that the election, early voting will start on the 23rd of October and then on the 31st of October. So this is the information that keeps you, really connected to the community.
And Eddie, the funny thing is you can get into the weeds real quick in terms of the specifics, right? And it seems to me like, well, I'm sure it seems to everyone, they're really passionate about this work, right? I mean, in the immigrant community, well, first of all, in any community across the country, getting people to turn out to vote is always a challenge. Any given election, it's always a push, especially and we know this, in communities of color, in communities with less economic, opportunities, in communities that already have challenges, especially, even post and during the pandemic, right? It's a challenge to get people out to vote. Add a layer to that this is sometimes folks' first time voting because they just became a U.S. citizen, or you're in a household with mixed families, both families that are undocumented and still are not on that path to be able to become a citizen and therefore not be able to become a voter. And then you add the layer of those individuals that for years have not been encouraged or felt part of the system and therefore have not become U.S. citizens. All of a sudden, especially post 2016, people seeing the sense of urgency in being able to become U.S. citizens, right? I mean, think about all the multiple layers that you are trying to overcome with one organization, right? With one organization, and you're trying to be really targeted, which I think adds a sophistication to your ability to, galvanize and project and be able to resonate with folks, right? So that is like, I just want to make sure that you don't, as you go through the, through the weeds of all the work you do, you don't miss, and we don't forget to highlight what a unique and yet highly effective role DUSA is playing on engaging one of the most politically and civically active immigrant communities in the state of New York and in many other states.
Lucia, one of the things that we really have to educate our community is basically the philanthropy part of it, okay? It's very expensive. We did an analysis, and also the Ford Foundation did an analysis a few years ago, that it costs about $35 to register someone, okay? It's a process, you got to include the data, that we use, the get out the vote. And it's very expensive, and we always telling, foundations and others that they have to invest more. More investment have to be done, in the civics. Not much is done, only when election time comes. And, sometimes very sad, I would say this, most of our funding have come from the private sector, Dominican business people that say, it's so important, so corporations, and we've been very blessed that we have received the support of the Carnegie Corporation. They have been very generous, in terms throughout the years, because they see the work that we do. And as well as New York Community Trust. So we're starting to learn how to navigate. They are starting to recognize what you just indicated, the importance of it, but funding, it's very detrimental, in terms of really pushing. And if there were other, national organizations in most instances, because they're national, we are a national organization, but limited, in areas where we have large population of Dominicans. It's not only New York, Dominicans throughout the country. So, right. We have a population of 2.1 million. And as you say, the fifth largest, maybe will become the fourth. In terms of subgroup, when we have New York, which is about 19.5%, Latino, making a difference, I mean, that's the appeal, and getting our community to understand that they have to support. For instance, we do the citizenship, it's free. We develop with a partner, you have a system called Citizenship Works, okay? So, you were able to fill out the N400. You're very familiar with this. It's a 22-page application. They could do it in Spanish, we will review it. Then we have to, for the events, we have pro bono attorneys virtually. Our community is doing this virtually, But when we started, in May of 2020, it was hard. We had to train our community how to use Zoom, how to turn on the camera, how to use it, finding there were, internet deserts, in the areas that we serve, for immigrants, and all these things doesn't get, publicized, there are so much need because the people are anxious to do it. So now we feel so proud, we process about maybe on a monthly basis from 50 to 60 people we register, but we do the full service. But we are very blessed that we are able to get from some of the organizations, such as Latino Justice and Naleo, and others, that provide us, help us with pro bono attorneys, that help them. But at the same time, the idea is as soon as you become U.S. citizen, make sure, you register to vote. So what we do a follow-up. We also, I just want to tell you a good news. We have returned for the last several months to the USCIS swearing in ceremonies to do voter registration. We used to do it every Friday before the pandemic. And we used to do 3, 4, 5 ceremonies of 150. And we used to register 300-400 people. Now, so that's, that's amazing. And who is the one that becoming U.S. citizens? Apply.
I want to make sure that we highlight this, right? Because, for those that don't know, and when you talk about it's expensive, we're talking about, or any organization, there's an infrastructure, it's operational, there's an executive director, there's staff, you talk about data. I don't think sometimes people, grasp that it's about communications with the people, it's conducting communication, ongoing communication with the individuals that you are assisting. It's a tracking. It's an involved process of being able to understand who your electorate is, understand who your audience is, who you need to both make them, get them to register their vote, have a conversation with them, or get them to the path of going through the citizenship process, which is much more prolonged, right? Especially in the Dominican community where we have different generations, right? Different realities in terms of immigration status, and there are different levels of engagement in the US political system. All in all, the reality is that we have so many different ways to do this, but the most effective is when people feel a connection to the organizations or feel a connection to a process where they're, not only is it a Dominican-based organization doing bunch of and involving a bunch of other different communities, but it's cross-generational. It has volunteers. It has an infrastructure. I never thought it was going to last this long period of time. It was started off as a project and then evolved into this institution and continues to evolve, in terms of the work that you do, including now the citizenship work. What do you think have been your lessons? Because there's so many communities. You're talking about we're waiting anxiously. We're all waiting for the national origin census data to be released. We haven't seen it yet. No ACS. The American Community Survey is going to come with additional data. All of that helps us have a clearer picture of communities, not because we don't want to treat everyone the same, but because there's different fundamental realities of how people engage in society that sometimes, they need to make those connections in order to be involved, especially immigrant communities. What do you say to those newer communities? Right? I'm still waiting for the big, Mexican boom in New York City. I'm half Cuban, half Mexican, right? And I've been watching the Mexican community, evolve in the last 2 decades. But what's a lesson that we can learn from the Dominican community who has been able to elect Dominicans in different levels of government, right? Has been able to see Dominicans in appointments in different levels of public service, has Dominicans and representation that, feeds a community's both pride and at the same time resources and vibrancy that goes to businesses and a focus of trying to uplift communities in certain demographics, right? Giving back. All of that folds into kind of talking about, where the Dominican community is in this moment in time. Can you share some lessons learned of your experience with Dominicanos USA, but also your experience in getting communities to engage and participate civically and actively politically?
That's so important. First, I think it starts with within the different communities. I will tell you that we help Central South Americans. We have seen a growth, in helping Mexicans, the Mexican community, which is very large, to apply for U.S. citizens, and not only citizens, they also ask for other information that's important. But I think the model or the example that they could learn from DUSA, and I have spoken to leaders in the Mexican community, and I think which is a very large population, and she works as well for the Colombians, which is a large population, the Central Americans from Honduras. The DUSA started because it was some ideas of wealthy business people in the Dominican Republic and here that felt that it was so important to help the diaspora, to help the community empower themselves, and they put up the money. They went in, they raised money. We had, when we first started, we got support from Grupo Punta Cana, Inicia, Central Romana. I could tell you some very important corporations, that have dealings in the Dominican Republic and here, and I think that was this kickoff. They really planted a seed that it's important, and I think that's a model that could be used, with other ethnic group, with other people from different countries. I think what helped us a great deal was establishing, a data system, hiring, someone that deals with data that has to do with voting, and investing a lot of money in that. We have a lot of technology. We're technology driven. In terms of the work that we do, because it's not like you said, just registering, you have to really do the back office, entering the information, and then reaching out, making sure that that particular person that you register receives their voter registration card. When election time comes, you have to do a huge investment in mobilizing, sending out a mailer is very expensive. We have, thanks to social media and technology, we're able to use on texting and phone banking and emails. So all those components are very, very helpful, and in terms of bringing out the word. But the idea will be to get people from their own community to really raise the funds. We don't see one of the things in terms of many of the government institutions providing assistance to the type of work that we do. I think it should. I think more, budget should be increased, even with the USCIS, United States Immigration and Naturalization Services, within the federal government. I think under the new bill, most likely, there will be an increase, for citizenship, because citizenship goes for voting. That's the essence of it. So, helping those groups, I think, is very important. And they learn, they call us, how could we do it? We are always willing to partner with any organization, and that requires the assistance of doing the online voter registration. When we used to do it in person, it was great, because we would go, make sure we could get a city, one of the city college or a church, and we do big events, with other partners such as CUNY Citizenship Now, NALEO, and others. But what used to take place was that we could bring it to the different boroughs at that time. So I think people are starting to realize, and you need the awareness. Awareness is so important. If you're not able to channel that, it's not only getting it in Univision or Telemundo. Next week there's going to be an event, and just don't continue to promote it. I think that's important. I want to say that we as an organization really was one of the few organizations that were really helping, throughout the pandemic, helping people become U.S. citizens. And during election time, we were out in the community, make sure, our team was vaccinated. We had tables at different commercial corridors. We were very busy and helpful with the census. The census was a tremendous, very important project. I know a lot of people got a lot of funding from the city. The city didn't fund us, but we went out there. We continue. We got volunteers. You were able to raise a little bit of money, and it takes money. It takes, and it takes money. It takes leadership. Takes people that are or team members that are passionate about what they do. And
now, Eddie, I think it's really important that we take it back to its beginnings, right? Apart from all the money that was provided, I think it's really critical that we, I mean, and I'm not going to ever forget him, right? Jorge Mursuli, who was one of the project designers, I would say, of Dominicanos USA, un Cubano from, born in Brooklyn, but, he's out in Miami right now, but he was Democracia USA, very successful Hispanic, Latino civic engagement project that was started and then consumed by, National Council of La Raza and Unidos US now. But, it's interesting when there's a model that works, no matter, where it lands, and there is a model that takes in using, la estrategia de los blanquitos también, right? Like the strategies that regular good government groups use, right? League of Women Voters have been successful throughout the years, decades of their existence. We took, and Jorge took, a page out of successful programming of voter and civic engagement. And I think that's something to be said about successful programs, and how, as communities, we need to learn from one another.
You hit on something that's so important. I mean, Jorge was the extraordinary, in terms of implementing that same model with Democracia. Different. Jorge and I say, believe, wow. When I said you could do 20,000 voter registration, that's impossible. It cannot be done. How can you do it? But we develop a model. We develop a strategy of training canvassers canvassers that are understood and went out there person to person. A lot of people used to do at that time, we might do 5 registration in an event and they never get reported to the Board of Election, and people would say, well, I registered to vote, if I could tell you some of the issues that we encountered, at that time in the beginning with the Board of Election, because we registered people and, the names couldn't be found. It have changed a great deal. But the model helped because we were able to do certain registration per hour. We were able to really participate in different activities. And really have leaflets out in the community explaining why it's important, and I think that was a key success. But as well, we had consultants, besides Jorge. We had the former governor of Puerto Rico, Aníbal Acevedo Vila, who used to, when he was the governor of Puerto Rico, he developed a huge strategy with the Puerto Rican office here in New York, and they established a program called Atrévete. Maybe you remember,
I remember Atrévete.
Atrévete. And Atrévete went out there, voter registration, and Nidia Velázquez got elected. She was the director, of the office of the Puerto Rican
Federal Affairs Administration. It was
and that helped to help that the Puerto Rican community was able to gain several seats in Congress, and that was a model. So he was also very helpful in others. We had Dr. Ramon Hernandez from the Dominican Studies Institute was part of the board in the beginning. So all of this really in understanding how this city operates and work is very important. Apart from that, we partner with many important organizations such as the League of Women Voters. We will have our canvassers that spoke Spanish going in, and to different communities. NYC Campaign Finance Board. We've been a partner with them since our inception. Going out, doing day of action. Just being out in the street. And at the end of the day, like you say, is those models that could replicate. And this could be replicated to other nationalities, countries, people, communities, and learn. We're part of the American Jewish Committee, AJC. They've been around for over 100 years. And you learn, because they experience, and really organizing, around a community of interest. You organize around a community of interest, and you find interest, and to connect it. In the beginning, nobody wanted to register. Nobody wanted to be U.S., U.S. citizens. Now I have such a long list. I have a waiting list of about 8,000 people that want to apply.
You build it, right? And people come.
And it's building. We just developed an online voter application. We've been, it's new. It's a pilot project. Anybody could go to our website, dominicanosusa.org. We develop it, and with a partnership with Rock the Vote, it's in our website, and it's interesting because we're getting calls from California, Georgia, and New York. We're pushing and trying to say yes, you could register if you have an ID with the Department of Motor Vehicles. So it's a process getting our community, and those are the things that really combine when you are able to connect, little now thinking about hybrid.
Yeah.
Do we continue with virtual?
Listen, these are the lessons that, I know that are critical for, more communities as the time goes on. Dominican community has elected and has been electing individuals into public office for quite some time. So it's not like anyone needs a Dominicanos USA in order to elect representatives, right? I mean, just 2 years in existence, and Dominicanos USA, saw in 2016 the election of Congressman Adriano Espaillat, first Dominican to be elected into the U.S. House of Representatives. Everyone was very proud of that. But Dominicanos, and that was years in the making prior to Dominicanos USA existence, right? Like you saw the transit, you saw the startup of the organization then, right? You saw everything you I'm sure had to learn while you were at Dominicanos USA. It's an inception, and then now, right? What has been the transition with the community's response? And you started this, right, in terms of saying how in the beginning nobody wanted anything. What happened between 2016, not just Adriano's, the congressman's election, but what happened in 2016 with the election of Trump, right? And then we're talking, the election of number 45, I like to call him. And now, what has been the motivation? What has been the process? And where do you think DUSA is going in the next couple of years?
Yeah, let me back up a little bit and just tell you that we started as well to register Dominicans and others in Rhode Island, and Rhode Island today has a lieutenant governor that is Dominican. Most of the city councils are Dominicans, and I think it's an interest. We have a very young population of young people in our community. And we have seen, the growth of really seeing more young people, aspiring for office. I think they see that there is an opportunity for them to participate in the electoral process. We've seen, for instance, in Brooklyn, Brooklyn is not like the Bronx, who has the largest Dominican population. They're so close to 355,000, according to the census 2017, 2019 community survey, and they, they elected, hopefully will be elected in November, in the primaries, a Dominican for the borough president. So that says a lot, in terms of what is the growth of the Dominican community. But our program is basically to educate a lot of young people to understand the political process, to educate them, and seeing that they could they can participate, especially women. I think that's so important. What we have seen, in terms of that participation, we saw it, in the past election. Prior to this administration, in several years back, during the presidential election, previous presidential election of 2016, a lot of people wanted to register to vote because they wanted to vote in the presidential election. Now, the other thing is that we have a lot of elections. There is special election, there's primary election, dates of elections have been changed. It used to be in September, now it's in June, the special election. So a lot of times there's a lot of confusion as well, we went through a process during the pandemic with, absentee ballots, a whole series of issues, in terms of educating the community. So it's really getting the community used to, in terms of now we have an election in November 2nd. And then we have a primary in June. Now we're redistricting, never, you won't know, what will be happening, what will be the areas. So it's getting back again, it's not going backwards. It's educating the community and preparing them. And who's putting up the money for that? Who's educating the community?
And let's be real, like when we keep talking about it's every nonprofit's challenge to go out there, and because we care enough to get the community involved, because we know how important it is and how much further we have to go. No one's going to do it for us, right? We know how important it is for the community to participate. We know the challenges. We know that sometimes knowing a little bit more and getting that information to someone else in and of itself is hard, right? Because
Yes.
we need to make sure that it goes far and wide. We need to make sure that it resonates. One-on-one is a very difficult feat. When you're knocking on doors, when you're getting a piece of mail, it's very different than when you knock on a door and you encourage someone and you answer their questions and you make them feel confident enough to be able to go for the first time to a polling location. So all those challenges are real. I mean, you mentioned Rhode Island, my other favorite state. But in Rhode Island, and this is just as an example, whereas in New York State, there's about, 4.5% of Dominicans in terms of concentration of the total pop. In Rhode Island, it's like 5%. It's such a tiny little state, but in concentration, there's a 5% of a Dominican population. And yet, regardless of density, regardless of, whether not only Dominicans are electing Dominican elected officials, the same thing we see across the board. There's definitely is a strong leadership and civic engagement aspect to the entire vitality of a community. And in this case, it's the Dominican community. We've seen it with mayors across, Patterson, definitely in other parts of New Jersey and Perth Amboy, parts of in Massachusetts, Lawrence, right? Lynn, Worcester. I mean, the Dominican community grows, but it also engages and participates. And I think it's really critical that we highlight that now because, organizations like DUSA are taking it up a notch, going further, being able to kind of say, yes, it's a natural love that the Dominican community has for baseball and politics. I heard that one time in a hearing, on redistricting in the 2000s, and I've never forgotten that. But beyond that, it is a desire to kind of see how we engage and how we all thrive economically, right? Because it is about being able to get ahead and being able to send our kids to school and to college so we see that in the numbers, right? In 2016, and now that, it's 2020, 2021, right? And we've gone through a major pandemic. What do you think some of the challenges are for the community? We saw huge amounts of devastation in Queens and in Upper Manhattan and across the country, but in Dominican communities in particular, we saw many those impacted by COVID, right? Families, in different economic realities. What do you think some of the challenges are, and how, is DUSA trying to rise through that?
Well, it's very important that you mentioned, Patterson, and Patterson and other areas, I just could point out that the mayor of Passaic is a Dominican, and he was very active with the situation that took place.
I was going to say Passaic, but I totally forgot about it. Yeah, during Hurricane Ida,
you have another group of a lot of migration that's been going south, to Pennsylvania, which is so important. And I think we all are feeling, when you see this migration, that have been living, throughout the years, is because the economic situation of gentrification, the high cost of rent, Washington Heights has become very expensive and other areas, as well as, getting hit with the pandemic. Many people lost their job. They were not able to work. The Dominican community, they're very much entrepreneurs, in terms of establishing businesses. And many of those businesses are closed down, restaurants, which is a big field within the Dominican community, and other businesses, so the business sector has been hit very, very hard. Many of those businesses will not be able to open. You have, for instance, the livery cap industry, which, have been a very supportive labor force, in transportation. Many of them have not been able to really get back to work. A lot of people got hit with COVID. So we see challenges, in terms of how the message could be provided, in terms of what are the opportunities. I know when the PPP loan came out, many of the small businesses didn't know how to navigate through that, and they didn't have all of the papers that were required, because it's a system, that you really have to be in tune. And how many, non-profits or organizations were there helping, Then the other issue that we have, our community have suffered, through the pandemic, I'm talking about the Latino community in general and then others, we got hit the most with COVID. Now, I was talking to some independent TV producers to see if we could get, maybe some of those vaccine buses. They could go to certain locations, and they could promote it, in terms of having the community to get vaccinated. Education, providing the information, why is it important? So we see that, thank God, schools just open. We see how that goes, and, you got to deal with the hesitancy, in terms of, why is it important? So there is a lot of challenge. There's a lot of challenge. Unemployment, a lot of the support with unemployment is going to be running out. That's an issue, but we are concerned. We are concerned. How we going to overcome all of this, economic perspective, that doesn't look so great. Food is getting, it's getting more expensive. You hear it, in the street. You go to the supermarket. People are buying from fruit vendors, and now in fruits, vegetables. We need to really have a Marshall Plan, a very robust plan. We're going to have a new mayor. And I'm going to say, just something that I think that's very important. I think Dominicans, in terms as voters, are getting more sophisticated. Not because if you're a Dominican, they're going to come and vote for you. I mean, if you bring the proper message, and that's what, that's the message that we hear. If you're able to work for better housing, housing costs, moderate or moderate income housing, more housing. We need housing. We cannot see our community leaving. In one sense, we see that there was an increase in the census, but people that cannot afford to pay $2,000, $3,000 for an apartment, they're going to go to Pennsylvania, they're going to go to Reading, they're going to go to Yonkers, they're going to
Allentown,
to other areas, that they can survive.
And you know what, Eddie, we are, as soon as that data comes out, we have seen, and many of us know, and you mentioned redistricting, and we saw, where the Latino community has decreased, where in places like Upper Manhattan, the population has decreased, but places of the Bronx, population has increased, places of Westchester, the Hudson Valley, parts of Long Island. We know that communities are shifting, right? They're moving, even though there's still like a hub space. I always find like Little DR, when I saw it on the map in Google Maps, I was like,
La Placita, Plaza Las Américas, La Placita on 175th Street.
Google actually says Little DR. And I was like, what the hell is Little DR? Like, since when does Google know about Little DR? And I was just like, this is so fascinating to me. Like, beyond Little DR, which is, we always said, and I always laughed at my folks, and I hate to say this, in Rhode Island, but like Washington Heights concentration of Dominicans alone is like state of Rhode Island's numbers, in terms of Dominicans. So like, there's something to be said about home base, right? Like, Little DR as little home base, but then the Bronx as an entire county versus a concentration of a space, above a certain, number in a certain street in Upper Manhattan. But, Dominicans are everywhere, pretty much. When I went out to Tennessee, I found myself a Dominican restaurant in Nashville. So I have to admit that, when I go out, I try to find as many communities as possible. We see it in Puerto Rico, right? We're seeing it in Florida. Florida is gaining a congressional seat. It's gaining it in areas where we have seen both the growth in Puerto Rican populations, but also an ongoing growth of Dominican populations in Florida. So, we're definitely going to be tracking it. I'm sure you and I will have an opportunity to talk again about this stuff, and we'll have a deeper conversation about the numbers when they do come out, and I'm sure about redistricting. But, I want to make sure that I ask you this question, right, for you, because too many times, and then, I have to admit that I get a little emotional when I speak of Angelo Falcón, right, and Hector Figueroa, both mentors of mine that passed way too soon, and I really think I ever had a conversation with them as to, why do you do this work, right? Like, why? Like, why tanto sacrificio, tanto stress? So, I mean, sometimes when because I've been dealing with this on redistricting right now, right? Every time someone's going to say something about a neighborhood or a community, maybe así, como que, like I'm trying to fight it, because I get this stress on my shoulders because I feel this energy that I want to fight. Like, I feel like I have to protect something. I feel like I see numbers and I see geography, and I'm like, I was thinking I was not going to feel that way, that I had gone through a Zen period where I was meditating and I wasn't feeling that kind of passion and commitment. But I'm saying, Eddie, why do you do this?
I'm going to tell you, it's not easy. Okay. People say it's easy because, first of all, you always got to be looking for money. When I took this position, I come from the business sector. Okay. I was in the money remittances, financial services. And I also had the opportunity, during my youth, to really be very active in the community, serving in the advisory committee for Hispanic affairs of Cuomo in the 80s. I'm not that young, so I had always an interest in urban planning and, seeing the diversification and the growth of the community. But I think what has kept me is that from very young, my father owned a garage on 174th Street in Washington Heights. And it was like the hub of bringing the community together, in terms of events. I remember, aunt's husband, Juan Marichal, at that time played for the San Francisco Giants. He would come in, and my father would have a block party on July 4th. And, all of the Anglos, elected officials, they, became very friendly with my father in the area because, it was a place that united the Dominican community was growing. This was in the early 70s, And I kind of grew up with that, feel, my father, translation and helping, and helping people to become U.S. citizens. And I think that kept with me, So I said, wow, this is a very interesting project when I was offered this position. And I said, okay, I'll take a couple of years and do it, and here I am still, I'm preparing a lot of young people that they could continue and take the realm of this, and sometimes I see some of the abuse, I would call it that way, that takes place in our community. And I say, wow, this cannot be, we got to struggle. We got to do it, It's very sad, when we saw that, it was so hard for somebody to apply for citizenship, that they were going to increase from $725 to $1,175. When people were being denied, and I said, wow, how should it be when we're helping you? They taking the civic classes, and I think it's an interest of seeing the growth of a community where you could really advocate for the future and have leaders. I'm very proud to say that many of the people that we have in our staff today, they're like Omar. I think you recommended Omar, by the way, Omar is a product of DUSA, Omar was able, to get a fellowship with Georgetown University, and I said, go, take it. He came back, started with our foundation. Now he's with NYC Votes, and working and doing and continuing. Austin. So when we see all these young people, really, moving into, better positions, understanding and taking, this role of really advocating, I think that's what satisfies me. But I don't know. Sometimes, like you said, it's a lot. Oh, you got a grant, and you might not get it.
So before we end, right, and before I let you go, I want to make sure that folks know they can visit dominicanosusa.org. Right? Eddie Cuesta is the executive director, has been the executive director, I think almost from the inception, right?
Yes.
About that time. I want to highly encourage folks, this kind of work doesn't just happen. It takes hard work. It takes financial resources. It takes commitment. It takes volunteers and a bunch of different partnering organizations. So before we end, and I want to thank you, Eddie, for joining us, for having this time to speak to me. But I want to encourage folks to visit www.dominicanosusa.org, volunteer, and definitely put your money where your mouth is and help our communities continue to thrive. So gracias, Eddie.
Gracias a ti. They could go into our website. We have all our report. And I just forgot to mention, we have a very important program, Coding with Young People, okay?
Yes.
So, with civic engagement, okay? Thank you, Lucia. Muchísimas gracias.
Gracias. Bye-bye.